We're going to start right now because it's 7:35 and we don't have much time. So I get to introduce our speakers today, and they don't want a lot of time taken up, so it's going to be short and sweet. So Dr. Nichole Huff is an assistant professor and extension specialist for family, finance, and resource management at the University of Kentucky. And Barb O'Neill is the owner and CEO of a financial education company called Money Talk, where she writes, speaks, and reviews content about personal finance. I'm super excited about this session, so take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Becky. Good morning or afternoon or evening, whatever time it is where you are, welcome. And so let's go ahead and get started. And so if you happen to tune into the Extension Ignite sessions, I gave a little teaser of this session, as this was a program that we did here in Family and Consumer Sciences Extension at the University of Kentucky back in the early February in March. It's that latter part of February of 2020, and it was part of a Big Blue book club. You know, we are Kentucky Blue here, and so it was part of a spring line of or winter line of programming that was really designed to go beyond your traditional webinar and as ways to find unique ways to connect with clientele during the pandemic. And so this was back in February, and you know, we were looking for ways to engage. And so we kicked off the Big Blue Book Club in January with a book. You can see it on the shelf, The How of Happiness by Sonia Lubomirsky. And so focused on mental health and wellness. And then the second book club is what we'll talk to you about today, which is Flipping a Switch by Dr. Barb O'Neill. And we were really looking at financial health and wellness, specifically retirement planning. And then we had one third book by Kentucky author Weta Michael, you know, just a few miles south, focused on food and nutrition, that followed this book club. So we were the second. And when I was tasked with choosing a text that was on financial, you know, health and literacy and some topic of that, you know, of course, Barb's book came to mind immediately, because, you know, what research shows us is that we are, you know, as a society, so underprepared for retirement, and the pandemic really exacerbated that. It brought to light, you know, financial readiness and whether or not we were ready. And so I wanted to, you know, cover retirement planning as a topic in a programming topic, but I wanted to include this in the book club so that people who would not sign up for a retirement planning workshop may just sign up for a book club. And so, you know, we partnered, you know, we, like, you know, many other extension programs, we're in every county across the state, and Kentucky has 120 counties. And so we worked with county agents to do a statewide program where we recruited participants and invited them to this 3-week book club series. And then we also invited them to join us in a private Facebook group where we could continue each weekly discussion online and kind of unpack some of the weekly content. All right, and so we did here in Extension at the state office, we purchased 200 copies of Flipping a Switch, and we distributed that throughout Kentucky counties. And so the first 200 participants or registrants received a free copy of the book. And then we offered 2 sessions per week, an AM and a PM session for 3 weeks. And so again, you know, online programming is so hard to navigate. What time do you do the session? Kentucky is in the central and in the Eastern time zone. And so, you know, picking times that were convenient for a variety of participants is always kind of, you know, a soft science. And so we were able to offer both a morning and an evening session during those weeks. We kicked this off during America Saves Week in February, because what better topic for financial literacy, then saving, and then retirement saving. And so we were able to time it with that. We gave away all 200 copies, but people will often sign up for a giveaway, which is good. Any way we can get information into the hands of clients, that we will take it. But we were very pleased with participation in this book club. And so it ranged from 74 to 167 is the Huff, with an average of about 122 each week. And our Facebook group included 147 active members. And so we thought that was very encouraging. Participants were provided with a reading plan ahead of time. And so Barb's going to talk about the content here in just a moment, but we divided the reading plan according to the sections of her book. So financial transitions, social transitions, and lifestyle transitions. And so we wanted to, again, make it easier for our clientele to follow along. And so providing them with the reading plan helped to focus their attention and just break down the content. And of course, it was a very natural fit with the way the book is laid out. And then we reinforced educational content, during the 3-week session. And so we really utilized that Facebook group as a way to unpack content, reinforce, gain user engagement, and just kind of, provide teasers and whatnot, and just as a way to, again, engage with clients. And then I tried to remain accessible. Of course, Barb did as well. And so we, if we encourage participants to submit questions. And so as they were reading, if they had questions that they wanted addressed in the upcoming webinar or that we could talk about in the Facebook group, just submit questions. And then we did take an evaluation here that I'll discuss at the end of the presentation. And so I'm going fast because we only have a short time with you. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Barb, who's going to unpack some of the content that we discussed during the book club.
Okay, so that was my piece of the project, was to walk the class members through the book and to answer any questions that they might have about the content. So on the next slide, you'll see that this was a perfect example of distance education, because I'm located here in Florida. I work out of my home office, and of course many of the participants were in Kentucky, and of course Nichole was in Kentucky. So on the next slide, just to kind of introduce the topic of my book, which, by the way, you can order through the AFCPE link in Pathable. Shameless promotion there. I use the word switch as kind of a metaphor for transitions that people make in later life. And I'll tell you in a minute how I came up with that analogy there. So there's lots of switches. And in fact, in the book, there's 35 of them that I wrote about. And on the next slide, you'll see that some of these switches are kind of on and off. But there's also switches that are kind of like a dimmer switch that you gradually turn. And some of the areas of people's lives that often change gradually as they leave a full-time career are working and their spending, the way that they do asset allocation for their investments, downsizing possessions, deciding to disengage from certain activities and engage with others, and also a desire for simplification. So on the next slide, again, just to reiterate, there were 3 sections of the book. Financial Transitions has 15 chapters, Social has 5, and Lifestyle has 15. So we decided, as Nichole said, to break the book club classes into those 3 sections and make them kind of the theme for each evening. Okay, so on the next slide, I'll just kind of walk you through some of the things that we covered during the content of those 3 classes. So I started with my story. So some of you know me, know that I worked for Rutgers University for many years, 41 years and 4 months to be exact. And I lived in New Jersey, and I began a new chapter of my life as a full-time financial education entrepreneur based here in Florida. So we began with that. And then I went on to explain the book title. And the title came about, and that's on the next slide, by me attending a meeting of the American Savings Education Council in 2018. And there was a research presentation there about spending in retirement. And the bulk of the presentation was about how people were going to be challenged and they hadn't saved enough money and Social Security wasn't going to cover all their expenses. And then they ended the presentation with a comment that there are some retirees, a small subset, that have a unique problem, in air quotes. And the problem is that they've saved their entire working life, and then they've amassed quite a bit of money and they're not comfortable spending it down because psychologically it kind of feels like a loss. And the speaker ended her presentation by saying we need financial education to teach people how to flip a switch from saving to spending. So that's how I got the title of the book. Okay, so on the next slide, you'll see the titles of the chapters in each of the 3 sections. So again, we started out with the financial and then the social and the lifestyle transitions. So I covered the content and we reviewed each of those 35 transitions during the 3-week series. On the next slide, just a kind of a summary of some of the things. It wasn't just me talking at the audience. We tried to have as many activities and discussion questions to really engage with them. So in the second class, when I talk about social transitions, one of the chapters in the book is how do you answer the what do you do question when you're no longer working full time. So we had an activity where the participants got to give that kind of answer and we discussed it. And we talked about what their biggest social transitions were and how they think their relationships would change when they're no longer working. We probably had more discussion and activities in the second class only because I was covering 5 chapters in that one, where the other ones we were covering 15. So I built in a lot more activities. There's a chapter in the book that talks about becoming the family storyteller when you become the oldest generation. So I had the participants write down a favorite family story. And then I talk in the book about identity bridging, which is where you carry over some of your pre-retirement activities to what you're doing after you leave the workforce. So we talked about that. And there was lots of time for questions and answers. Okay, so on the next slide, some of you may be wondering, can this program be replicated? And the answer is definitely yes. I mean, the class slides are developed. Not only did I do the 3 one-hour classes for the Big Blue Book Club, but I also had an opportunity last week because one of the participants was from the University of Kentucky Alumni Association director, and she wanted a 1-hour version for all the UK alumni. So I do have 1-hour and 3-hour versions of the program that could be easily replicated virtually, even in person perhaps. I don't know. So contact me if you're interested, and perhaps there's a way that you can replicate the content, and certainly the format you can replicate by talking to Nichole. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Nichole, and she's going to talk about how the program was evaluated and the impacts that we've seen so far.
Yes, and so it was all very positive. And I'm trying. Becky's going to feed us some questions here with any time that remains in just a few minutes, but I may be able to answer some of them just as I discuss what evaluation metrics were collected. So of the participants, we had 71 that completed the evaluation at the end of the 3 weeks. 30% were first-time book club attendees from, so they did not participate in the first one of the series. So we had some joined us again, but then we had some new who were particularly interested in this topic. We had about 1/3 of the state represented. The majority were female, and the majority did attend most of the sessions. And so 93% attended all 3, 96 attended at least 2 of the 3. And then you'll see we, ask age by range. And so we had a decent range of ages represented, with the biggest age group being 56 to 65, and then 66 to 75, 46 to 55, and then 36 to 45. But something that I was intentional about as as we had discussions, and then Barb was, because this was a concern going in, if you weren't ready to flip that switch yet, or if you were past and just had not prepared like you should. And so we made sure that the material was positioned in such a way that everyone could glean something from it. So that if you were preparing for the future, or if you were right in the middle of it, that we made it applicable as possible for whatever age range and level of retirement readiness that you had. Now, we did not, I saw someone ask about income. I did not poll income, but we did ask participants something that Barb discusses in her material, which, how would you classify yourself, especially financially in light of the pandemic? Reduced income and struggling, stable income but anxious, or increased income with opportunities? And so the majority of the respondents indicated that they had stable income, but they were really anxious about the financial situation that they were currently experiencing. And again, some of that due to pandemic related problems. So the feedback was, again, useful and well received, with 79% saying it was relevant for their current life stage, and 87% saying that it would be relevant for a future life stage. And then 59 of participants said that, it was relevant in assisting an older family member who was transitioning to retirement. And so that was something that we, again, were very intentional about how we framed it. So if this information wasn't hitting your life stage on the head, then share it with somebody else. Make sure to pass that information along. And so we saw that people were doing that. And so by and large, people felt engaged with the book club and the activities. They thought the material was presented in such a way that it was easy to understand and useful, and that they gained knowledge and were likely to use that knowledge. And then we saw that 85% reported they discussed the reading material with someone outside of the webinars or the Facebook group, which just really suggests this social multiplier effect. Because, as an extension educator or any financial educator, you don't want the knowledge that you impart to just stay with that client. You want it to reach others. And so we saw people talking, and I thought that was a really great thing. We also asked participants, did the program help them set a future goal? And if so, what was that goal? And we had a lot of responses. 93% indicated that it did help them set a goal. And here are some of the things that were mentioned. And so people were actually able to articulate, hey, what is my next step? Because we want them taking action as a result of participation. And then again, we said, well, hey, what was your biggest takeaway? What was your biggest aha moment? And here are a few of the quotes that stood out to me. So, retirement has always felt so far into the future, and I've always been hesitant about looking at retirement. But, the sessions and the book made me much more confident in even considering it. And so we saw repetitions of these comments over and over on the evaluation, that people appreciated having the material unpacked in a way that was friendly and accessible. All right, so what next? And so we'll have just about 5 minutes for questions. But as far as us and replication potential, we also are doing a new book club that will kick off after the first of the year in 2022. We had just a great response, and we'll do it much the same way, where our first book is focused on mental health and wellness. Our second book is focused on financial health and wellness. And then the third will likely be focused on food and nutrition. And so we program the comprehensively and look at really the whole person and whole health. And so I personally will be taking the lessons that I learned from this Big Blue Book Club and then using them with a different text in 2022. All right, so that's it. We can open it up for questions now, Becky, if any came in.
Awesome. The kind of the biggest question is about costs. There are several people who want to be able to do this. This is really exciting. But then how to do it and how to handle the cost. Can you guys talk about that in real practical ways here?
You want to start, Nichole?
Sure. I'll show you how we handle things. And so I was lucky to have the support of FCS administration here at Kentucky to offer a stipend to pay for books. And then we also, some counties who had, once our 200 were distributed, if people wanted other books, we also reached out to county agents and said, hey, if you are able to fund any of this, or if you are able to purchase any books out of pocket, and some were, because the way our extension is structured, everybody is operating on a different pot of money. We do have mini grants that we have agents apply for too, if they want to purchase educational resources such as this. And so I was able to capitalize on, again, just a way that UK is looking to promote programming during this pandemic. And so we were able to redirect some resources that we couldn't use for in-person programming and direct them for online programming. But Barb did make it, easy to work with in order to obtain such a large quantity of books. But I'll let you maybe address it from other angles, Barb.
Well, I think several people, myself included, have mentioned the possibility of getting a sponsor that might help pay for the cost. Certainly writing it into a grant would be another possibility where you, again, would have an external source. I did mention too that 200 was the break point, the first break point where you can get a savings on the cost. So if you have multiple parties, and I'm thinking like county extension, where you can get multiple counties pooling their orders and have one order that goes over 200, you might be able to save some money that way.
Super, that's really helpful. What about the time? Maybe a little personal, but Barb, as far as being able to compensate you for your time, how does that work?
Well, basically it would probably be $200 for a 1-hour session. And at this point, because all the class materials are developed, unless you want something new, probably about $600 for 3. And then of course, if you doubled it, if you wanted to have morning and evening, then it would be double that. So pretty inexpensive, because again, the work has been done, and
awesome. Thank you. Awesome.
Doesn't have to cost a lot.
Yeah, perfect. We know that I'd like to hear what you guys think about, just like we know that, for people that have skin in the game, that makes a difference in their coming through. So I've done some giveaways or whatever, and that doesn't always result in people, hanging in there. You guys had a lot of, it sounded like your numbers are still very high, even though you gave the books away. What do you think about, having there be some charge for the book?
Yeah, I think that is valid. As you saw, we gave away more than participated, but again, I think that it's still a resource. So I consider that a win. And I still think at our high at 167 participants, I thought that was great, given that many did stay with us through the series. And so I think it really comes down to your situation and your ability to fund this. And so your program allotment, I think that that people, especially, our theme was happiness. And so this was talking about financial happiness in later life. And so we were especially theming our programming at a way to just interject, some positivity at a time, and that wasn't very positive. And so, but again, we were able to redirect some of that funding because we weren't able to meet in person. And so, everybody's situation will be different. But I think that invested cost, usually people stick with that. So I don't think you can go wrong, but
Yeah.
Barb, you might have a different opinion to that.
No, I think you said it all.
Yeah, so lots of different ways to finance it. How did you advertise? How did you get
Yeah,
people to
social
sign up?
media. So we have we have a central hub for FCS extension here, and then we push it out and then have county agents share it. So many of those across the state also have social media, but we advertise in advance. And so we have newsletters that go out throughout the state and in each county. And so we try to do both direct mail outs, again, depending on what counties use. And so we get the information to the county agents who then push it out, whether it's by print or by digital means. And so we of course invited participants from the first book club to join us, but then just use our social media channels to advertise at a state level.
Okay, awesome. I think we may be done here. We have one more
Yeah,
question.
we're at 1 o'clock.
Okay, Barb, we do have one more question in the chat for you directly about purchasing the PowerPoint and discussion questions, and then training facilitators. So anyway, hopefully the message y'all are getting is that this is there's a lot of interest in this. So really, really exciting to get to be part of this session. So great job. Everybody have a great rest of Thursday, I guess. It's Thursday already.